Happy Thursday and welcome to On the Move with Nan and Kam. And we have a very special guest today. You know, it is UCrop's Monument Avenue 10K season around here, one of our favorite events. So we have Jon Lugbill, our executive director. He's been on before.
Yeah,
we were just talking about the retirement announcement was your only other time on the podcast.
Yeah, so this is crazy. We get to talk about, one of the most awesome events in Richmond.
Yes, and there's really nobody who knows it better, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I was the guy that was driving up and down Monument Avenue in my Jeep and hitting the odometer. You know, things like Map My Run and stuff didn't exist. Yeah. So, to map out a 10K course. And then I ran around town for a year trying to sell it. And finally, the UCrop said yes. And here we are.
Yeah. You're right here. Yeah, so you're part of the 10K Legacy Club, which is, a big deal. Everybody who's been there for every year so far. And this is, I've said this before, but we joke on staff that the 10K is kind of your baby, but it kind of actually is. So tell us a little bit, you already jumped in some, but tell us a little bit about how the 10K first came to be created, like how you had the idea, whole process for how you got it sold.
So I first moved to Richmond. I did a few races with the Richmond Roadrunners Club and, just as a runner and was always kind of, I'd ask, why aren't we doing a running race on Monument Avenue? And they were like, because you're going to have to close it down and it's going to be really expensive. At the time in Richmond, you didn't do full closures. So we took over the Richmond Marathon in 98. You didn't do full closures of the road. It's weird to think that traffic would be in one lane and runners would be in the other. It's really scary. But that's how it was when we took over the marathon. And so the idea that we were going to have to shut down Monument Avenue and how much that was going to cost was just intimidating.
Yeah.
It was going to be expensive. But we had confidence that we'd get the numbers.
Right.
And I think we had to have 1,500 runners to break even the first year, and we had 2,500. So,
he said, told you.
Total, hey. But that was a big leap. And so the course, the other thing that was really important, and it's weird, I feel a little funny talking about it too much, but basically until Arthur Ashe statue went up, we couldn't do it because it was just Confederate generals. And so there's a little bit should we have done it anyway since there were Confederate generals, but Arthur Ashe was just such an important person. He was such an important person to sports backers. He was our first speaker at our scholarship dinner. And so there's just a real relationship there. And so all our pictures originally in and around Arthur Ashe Monument.
And
there was a bunch of dogwoods that were in bloom the first year. So they made for great shots. So it actually worked out really well.
Yeah. Has it always had such an intense oh gosh, it's 10K? Or did that take a while to grow?
So it's weird because, the myth is that, we thought we did everything right. We had chip timing. That was brand new. We had online entries. There are things that are funny today. But then you look at pictures from the first year and we had the start finish banner strung with yellow propylene rope to 2 lampposts. And it was just, so primitive compared to what we do now. But,
you're doing your best.
Yeah. And so to have 2,500 people in the very first year, and then the next year 4,500, and the next year 7,500, the thing was just off. And we had so many, back then it was a big deal to have bands out on a course or have any kind of entertainment. So the fact that we had so much entertainment on the course, everybody loved. And then at the time we were finishing in Monroe Park, where you could have this big festival and party, and UCrops really got into it they'd lean on vendors and we'd have all sorts of food, try food, pick up food, all over the park. And so it had just a big race feel. It's funny because it doesn't feel, but it had a bigger race feel than any event in Richmond. And so, and then the marathon and the 10K were opposite ends of the season. So you could use one marketing list to market to the other. And that's also kind of cute. Back then you needed people's mailing address and you would mail the marketing materials. So having a database was really valuable, and it really wasn't until Facebook and some other social media, and for that matter Google ads, got sophisticated. And that was kind of 2010 kind of time frame. So really, those first 10 years, the power of our mailing database was incredibly important to the event's growth, and it's kind of cute today.
Yeah, I know.
Quaint.
It's the last
Quaint.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little address book.
Yeah.
Was that the first one that you saw through since you've been at Sports Backers at that point, from like very beginning creation to end? Or had you had other races that had such a big hand in helping create?
So I was co-race director for the marathon, but we had taken that over from the Richmond Times-Dispatch. So Gordon Fetty and I did that in 98 and 99. And that was, it was almost like starting from fresh, but it wasn't. It had a history. And then Sports Backers had organized different events, but this was the first running event, and that was purely ours. And we actually went to the Roadrunners to partner, because we, at the time, were partnering pretty closely on the marathon, and they were like, "No way, that's going to be way too expensive, and we can't afford a loss." And so it's kind of funny now. But yeah, so Sports Backers just branched out on our own, and off we went.
It's such a kind of a scary thing to do, obviously.
Yes.
When people are telling you it's not going to work, it's going to be too expensive, you're going to lose, and you're like, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And then to see it work is told you guys. But it's wow, I really did. I don't know. I just sit at home sometimes and I'll be like, how does Jon feel?
Yeah.
Having the fourth largest 10K in the nation. I'm like, I wonder how does it feel?
I mean, it's neat because it's, you talk about work and you want to have, things that last. And it's funny because some things that last are like buildings, right? And yet we're sitting here in Sports Backers Stadium that's about to be torn down. The new office, it's going to be great. It's going to be there for 30 years. But when I think about things that have been built, like the UCrops Monument Avenue 10K, Dominion Energy River Rock, the Allianz Richmond Marathon, those are big time events that are just really important to the Richmond community, and they're just really successful and are going to continue. I can keep going, the Carmax Tacky Light Run, and others, but that feels really good. And it feels good that you've built something that can stand the test of time, and it's not there. It's not going to continue. It's not going to struggle to continue because I'm not working here.
Right.
And so that's the thing that's really neat. It's built so well. It's so well established in the community. It's just going to keep going.
Yeah, when Cameron was saying how do you being told no, that is also not as in the grand scheme, the 10K, that's what we're talking about, but that's also got to be the case. Some of the other events that you've thought of creating, is that something that has always been a quality to you, that you are just fearless and self-directive to do these big things?
Yeah, I don't know how to separate some of the things. I will say this though, I was 17 years old. I was a highly competitive canoe racer. I think many people know the story. And Washington, D.C. we never raced on the Potomac River, but they had these wild rapids right below Great Falls. And so as a junior in high school, I decided we were going to have a race in the gorge right below Great Falls. And I had to get permission from the National Park Service to put this thing on. I was a junior in high school.
Yeah, that's wild. That's nuts.
I was the event director, right?
That is crazy.
So it's kind of nuts. And you guys have seen that gorge, there's cliffs.
Oh,
and
yeah.
stuff. And so it's nuts that we put on a kayak race there. And it's nuts that I was the race director.
Right.
And I was the first. It was the first one. It was the first one ever. And it became this instant classic. Now they do it kind of different. Slalom racing like that, there aren't enough people doing it anymore, but now they hang gates on Great Falls itself and do races on Great Falls. So it's kind of like our race just kind of moved upstream and into this, really massive waterfall. And so it actually is really, I never really thought about when I first was at Sports Backers that was something that kind of, I just grew up with that's what you did.
Right.
Yeah.
Obviously other people, that's not the case.
And
then there's a certain confidence that comes. And I think Malcolm Gladwell talks about it in his book, The Tipping Point. But there's something that comes with confidence when you've done it before.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
You get some success. So having willingness to take on these things builds. And so there was an element that my coming to Sports Backers, being executive director, it kind of opened the door to some of those things happening.
Yeah, it's a good quality.
I was in charge, right? Like there's I'm lifting my shoulders, I'm cringing a little, but like the when you're in charge, we have a board that oversees me, but a lot of the blame if something doesn't work falls on me.
Right. Yeah.
And so if I'm not worried about the blame, then nobody is.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain freedom that comes from being the person that's in charge. And then what's the calculated risk? I mean, the 10K, we're talking, the risk was in the, are we going to lose $5,000 or make 15? Like it wasn't,
life or death.
It wasn't hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah. And we had just lost $100,000 at a golf tournament that we had tried saving. And so, some things are relative. So the risk with the 10K seemed pretty minor in comparison to the golf tournament.
You're like, well, I just did that.
Sorry, this will be a success, still, even if it's a failure.
We didn't do well at the golf tournament. We actually had to raise donations to help us survive that. And one of our board members was like, John, when you're going to play in the street, sometimes you're going to get hit. And so it was kind of like, oh, great. But in the event creation business, that's what happens, right? Some are more of a success than others. I always say that book, Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath, is really important because what it says, basically why some products really sell and others don't, there's some core elements to whatever the product is that actually decides its fate. Not how well it's marketed or sold, but there's some core elements. Do they really resonate with an audience that's big enough? And the core elements of the UCROPS Monument Avenue 10K were actually that everybody can take part. We used to say run, walk at the end of the name. And I think the fact that we were so intentional marketing to people of all speeds, and then we made it a party. Yeah. And so it no longer became just for those fast people, though if you want to run fast, it's an incredibly fast course. If you want to walk it, it's a great course. It's beautiful. It's fun. The architecture is great, beautiful houses. And so we just created an atmosphere that stuck and people liked it. And so they keep coming back. And I always say, well, we're great marketers, but, and you all work in marketing. So, of course.
That's right.
and we had the power of UCROP supermarkets at the time too, and you can't separate that. They had 40% market share. They had a whole healthy living initiative. Sunny was their little character was featured in all our race stuff. So the fact that UCROPS had such a marketing reach, it was that core concept of the 10K that really stands out.
Yeah. What have been some of your favorite moments, personal favorite moments and highlights? It's a big question for however many years.
It's been a lot of fun. And I've been in the position to get out on the course and see it. I always cringe when so many of our staff only ever see the start or the finish or both. Maybe the finish festival for a little bit. But being out on the course and seeing it in all its glory is just incredible. Things like watching some guy get passed by someone else dressed up as SpongeBob. And you're just like, what? Some guy in a huge cardboard costume is running by me, like there's a certain element. The guy that ran is Indiana Jones. And he had this giant boulder behind him. It was I don't know how he blew the thing up, but it was, 8 feet tall. And he finished, he was like 50 minutes.
Half in the fall. And I was like, I guess, because he does the 10K every year.
Yeah, that's trained.
A half with a tuba. It's crazy. You think people train with their costumes on?
No, I think they might run down the block to make sure they can run in it if it's as elaborate as the Indiana Jones one, but no.
It's a boulder.
Yeah, and that whole dress up and run contest thing was so foreign and yet so wonderful. Yeah. And so that added to the 10K atmosphere right away. And I think the whole idea that, now we call it a celebration of wellness. We weren't that articulate then, but it really turned into this and one of our former employees, Tracy Russell, she was actually our race director for the 10K for the first 7 years. And when she left, she went to organize the Peachtree Road Race in Atlanta, which is the largest 10K in the country. And she came back a couple of years later and she goes, what's different? The UCROPS Monument Avenue 10K, everyone's training for it. And people are preparing all spring. In Atlanta, they just do the event to get the shirt. And a lot of them aren't trained up at all, and they're struggling across the finish line, and it's just a different vibe. And you're kind of like, that just makes me feel good, you know? Like, hey, wait, we're actually helping the community be more active. Even the people walking are like practicing to get ready. And she laughed because in Atlanta, nobody thinks they actually have to get ready for this. It's just a 10K. You go out, you do it, you know, you struggle, whatever, and then you brag about it on Monday, you wear your shirt to work. But in Richmond, people actually train for it. So yeah, we've created a different vibe, which is kind of cool.
You see people running and walking literally everywhere in Richmond. So
yeah, right now with the weather turning nice, it's really gotten to be like really neat, and it is noticeable. Like, you know, I'm out there all the time, so I guess, you know, because I run and bike all the time, but conscious of people running.
Yeah.
You're like, look at all these people running.
Yeah, but it's noticeable during the 10K. There's more in the fall, right before the marathon. There's more. Like it is really cool. It's cool to see your work actually reflected in people's behavior in the streets and trails and places around Richmond.
Right. It's to the point where I'm almost like, if I do see someone running now or like before a race, I want to ask them, like, hey, are you doing the race next again? Because I'm like, they just have, like, if you don't know, like, if you're new to the area, like, I want to be the one to tell you, like, hey, you can train for something. Like, there's a bunch of running events in Richmond you can do. Yeah. So yeah, every time I see somebody running, I'm like, where are you going?
Yeah, well, and you get to be like me, and you're always wearing a 10K season. You're wearing 10K gear when you're training. When you're out running, you're doing 10K gear, and then it's marathon season. You're putting on your marathon stuff. Yeah. So yeah, there is a method to madness. When I retire, Jill says she's going to get rid of all my logo gear, but it's not going to happen. I know some people over here. I think I'll be able to. Let alone entering the events. I know. It might be hard.
You'll be volunteering in every
not have the 10K.
What do you think is something that people would be surprised to know about the 10K?
Surprised to know about the 10K? Boy, no.
Well, I have a question first. 1998 was the first year, correct?
2000.
Or 2000 was the first year. How old were you in 2000?
I was 39.
And the marathon, that's what it was. It was when you took over, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think about the 10K, I think. Something is the same year as I was born. Because I was born in 98. So like.
Okay, so we took over the marathon.
Yeah. Like, how old were you then?
Well, it's interesting because, and we have these throwback sweatshirts, which I don't have on aisle.
I almost wore that one too.
But underneath the logo, the kind of the tagline, "A new tradition is born."
Yeah.
And part of that is because in 2000 there was all this stuff about what's going to be new in London. You know, there was all
time
this.
To be alive.
Yeah.
2000 is like time capsules and all this stuff, right? And so the fact that we created the 10K and launched it and did it all in 2000, and really it launched right after New Year's, which was like the big thing. There was a certain point that like. In my sponsorship letter to UCrops right off the bat, I said this is going to be one of the largest running races in America.
Yeah.
I wasn't even small, and I said it's going to rival Boulder 10K in Colorado and the Peachtree Road Race in Atlanta. So I actually named the two largest running events in the United States. Is what we were going to be compared to.
Tickets.
Yeah. There was an element of aiming big for sure.
Right. I feel like when you aim big, then it's like, again, what do you have to lose? Because you're already like, I'm gonna be there.
Yeah. Were you doing a course job before you were in the command center? What's your evolution of your race day duties looked like?
Oh,
That's a good question.
I've done almost everything. Yeah. I was almost always on start line duty originally. I helped start when we had the Dash for the Cash. I'd help start people out there. I worked the finish line a lot. And then, more than anything, I would go around and look for what could be done differently.
Yeah.
I was incredibly guilty. So, like, I had this mindset, which is actually really good, but isn't always received well, is that no matter how good the event was, there's always room for improvement. Right. There's always things to do. And I used to, between Saturday and Monday, I would have my list. I'd come in on Monday morning ready to go with like improvements for next year. And we just like knocked it out of the park and had this wonderful event. And here I was like, well, we can do this better. Do that. And so I learned that I had to wait. And then eventually, and at first we would just have meetings and we'd set up meetings. Well, now there's meetings already scheduled to review all the different parts of every event, every year. So now it's part of our culture on how to do it, but nobody does it on Monday.
We're still unloading some trucks, answering some emails.
But I think the idea that you really search for improvements, whether the event was great or not, like that you're always pushing for better, I think has become part of the DNA at sports fairs. I hope that lives on. I hope it's actually true. And I think that's something that has made the 10K, even though it was wildly successful, we could improve upon it and make it better over the years.
Yeah. What's your favorite job that you had to do at it? What was your preferred?
Seeing people at the finish line is pretty special. Like, when you're near the front of the race, it's not that big a deal. But the fact that we have people that are training for the 10K, and it's a big deal to cross the finish line. I mean, one year, lady came across and older woman was there meeting her at the finish line. And they were both just in tears and hugs. And this was the last finisher of the race. And so then I just go up to her and I start talking. And it's like, why was this so emotional? And she goes, I had never walked more. She was seriously overweight. And she said, I've never walked more than a quarter mile since I was a little kid. And so when I was crossing the finish line, I was thinking about how hard it was to sign up, to actually make the commitment to think that this is something that I could do. And she tells the story of going to our 10K training team for the first time and about how hard it was because she could only do a quarter mile and how she then needed all this support and everything and how much it meant to her mom that she was taking that positive step. And so you're just like, oh my God, and this is someone that took 2 hours or whatever it was to do the race. And you just realize like this event means more to people than whether we were all proud of, getting 25,000 people out there. But that one person was a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And also like, it's just goes to show, I mean, I think so many times people think about those like fast runners, but I always think I'm like that race to her had almost even a larger impact than it does to somebody who can do it in, 45 minutes and be done. Like it always makes you feel really good at the finish. I agree.
Yeah. And I know, there's been different fun. Another time that was actually really wild is we had a gentleman had a heart attack. He had cardiac arrest out on the course right before mile 4. And he got resuscitated. Spectators jumped in, gave him CPR right away, saved his life. A few months later, he wanted to finish. And so the Richmond police were like all in and they escorted him and a bunch of us went with him to walk the last 2.5 miles to actually cross the finish line, again, which it was really moving. And some of those stories are traumatic, but we've seen so many of the survivors use it a way to promote CPR in the community and to get people to actually take it seriously because we have seen it save lives. And to actually see it on the 10K course is really cool. And to be able to be, normally during the race, you're running around or I'm in the command center and I'm getting a call about, cardiac arrest, we needed a medic at a certain place. That's a very different experience from actually being with the person when they're healthy and fine and crossing the finish line. So it was nice to have that.
Yeah, I will say that you said that we have meetings after the race about like, we can do better and whatever, but we also have, you make it a point to be like, okay, everybody share a story that they either saw or they heard or like something that happened to them. And we always have like, everybody always has something to say because we see so many people and there's so much going on and everybody does a different job that it's like, there's always going to be good and like scary stories, but there's so much to do and see and so much is going on at every. I can imagine doing it year and year and year and year and then like all the stories that you could have and tell. Like you said, you could probably be here forever talking about
it. I think storytelling is also something you have to be intentional about. So part of the reason I do it at staff meetings is because if you don't do it, like you don't
The
do
story
it,
does,
right?
yeah.
And if you get used to telling the story, you're more likely to do that in another situation. And for sports backers staff, and for that matter, even our board, we have storytelling practice with them as well, that we make it intentional, that people always want, can you just like tell me the elevator speech version of who the sports backers is or about the UCross Mighty Mountain 10K? But you can do that. But if you tell them a personal story that actually has some meaning, they actually remember that. So like having personal stories is really important to communicate, and to have your communication actually impact somebody else. Even if they can't remember all the details, and they won't remember any of your facts or figures, but they'll remember stories.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge reason of like why everyone on staff loves our jobs is also, I think on the day-to-day, we think in such logistical terms, and we have these events so down to like a science and a well-oiled machine of like what you do year over year. And like, did I check all these boxes? But then when you're out there and you're really seeing the way people are reacting, coming across the finish line, how nervous people are at the start, people's loved ones waving to them at the start, all of that, you're like, wow, this actually like makes a huge difference year over year to so many people in the community, that it does just like give you that push to like want to keep going and perfecting and making things better. But yeah, this day's great. I'm excited for it, talking about it now.
It's awesome. We get to work at a place where we make thousands of people. I joke that it's like the happiest place on earth, watching at the 10K finish line. It sort of is. Everybody's happy. Everybody's cheering each other on. And it really is just a whole wave of positivity. I know Paul Woody wrote a great article. His son Pete had worked for us for, 12, 13 years.
A long time.
But Paul had written this story for the Richmond Times-Dispatch that I thought captured the essence of the 10K better than anything else I've ever written. He talked about how there's like a vibe in the air. It's almost spiritual. And that there's so much positivity when you have that many people all doing something positive together. It creates this overwhelming sense of euphoria. And so it's just really neat. It's neat to have somebody actually, in writing try to capture that. And that's always one of the things, like we try to produce like marketing materials and different things to capture that. But that's something that's, it's like trying to write about a subwoofer, making your stomach feel funny during music, right? It's hard to, if you don't feel it, you don't feel it, right? But I think he did a really good job.
Well, there's some validation from it being somebody outside of us, too, that is also experiencing it that way, because that's how we want them to feel about it.
Right. Yeah, and we might have that feeling because we're proud. Like there's an element of like, of course we have that feeling because we're proud of what we've produced, but to have other people like say that and talk about it, it's okay, good. It's not just us.
Right. Yeah. To have the feeling, because like you said, a lot of the time when you're doing something and it goes well, you are like, okay, whew. But then if you can make somebody else feel that way just because of like what's going on, then it's also like you just said, it's like, wow, okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that's powerful about live sporting events too. And I think we too often get caught up in like who wins and loses and things like that. And I hate to talk across all sporting events, but there is something that is actually, there's a reason the ancient Greeks created the Olympics, right? The reason they kind of celebrated athletic excellence. There's something to watching humans push themselves. And I guess what's happened now is that we've learned through the 10K and the marathon and other things is that people pushing themselves to have their own personal best or their own overcome their obstacles is also something really special and fun to watch and be part of. And so I think that, we tend to talk about it more with the marathon, but it happens at the 10K all the time. And so that like watching regular people overcome obstacles to have their own triumph, there's something very uplifting about that is part of why sports is so fun to watch.
Yeah.
And don't be like shared experience at the finish line, because I told Ashley the first time I was at the finish line, I said, I can't do this anymore.
I'm emotionally drained.
I don't know any of these people, so I cannot be here anymore.
Yeah, toward the end of the marathon, if you're the one handing out medals, it's just tears. It's just tears.
I can't believe,
It's just tears. It's hugs from all sorts of random sweaty people.
Yeah.
And
You You don't care.
Cheers from everybody.
Yeah. What has been the biggest change that you've seen with the 10K over the last 26 years?
Just the whole online nature of everything is so much different. The whole social media part, the whole change, how media's changed. We used to have all the results in the paper, You have a special section of the paper.
People still remember that a lot. It gets brought up still.
So some of that stuff's, that's just changed. It's just changed. And we thought we did well when we had people register online. In fact, we used to give them a discount to enter online. And so it's just evolved and changed, now, I don't know, 99 point whatever % signs up online. So it kind of the electronic background stuff, which I guess the consumer doesn't really, that's all just nuance to them. I think one of the joys of the 10K, people's socks look different, or their running outfits maybe aren't as tight as they used to be, or whatever, brighter colors. I guess shoes used to all be boring color. There's things that have changed over time that, change a little bit the look, but that fun positivity has stayed true to this event. And so there's a certain element of what's really important actually hasn't changed that much. And so there's an element like how we accomplish that and how we work to get it. Sure, that changes, but yeah, the core element of the 10K is still there.
Yeah. As your grand finale K comes up this year, what do you hope happens with the 10K in the future?
Yeah, I'm so thankful that you all are letting me run this year, so I don't have to be in the command center. The only times I've had a chance to run the 10K is during the pandemic when we were
I ran it that year too.
Remote locations. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be pretty special to be able to run. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm starting in Wave J, so if anyone wants to...
I was going to say, do you want to tell people about Jon's wave?
Yeah. And for that matter, there's Team Lugbill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you can... I don't have any restrictions on it. There's no passcode. So if you want to run in my team, you can just sign up and do that. And I think, for me going forward, the most important thing is that the 10K keeps bringing all the benefits it does to the community. And probably one of the most powerful statements about that we ever had is after Ukrop's Supermarkets was sold, we thought that Ukrop's might not want to be title sponsors. So we had a meeting with Bobby Ukrop, and he looked at me and said, the Ukrop's Monument Avenue 10K is the most impactful thing that we ever sponsored at Ukrop's. And we want to keep supporting that for as long as we can, because it has the greatest impact in the community. And it was just so wow, to have a title sponsor that basically turned from, what we thought was a marketing sponsorship to something that was totally philanthropic was just incredible. Yeah. And so that is just a kind of a reminder that we got to keep that going, we as a community need to keep that going, because that just shows how much impact this event can have and how many lives it can touch.
Right. No matter how much we talk about the cookies and the cupcakes, it's really about the two of us coming together and making something that's actually good for the community.
Yeah. It's also, it's such a unique thing to have a sponsor that is that deeply enmeshed in an event too, and has been since the beginning. Right. Also, Bobby cares about it just as much as the rest of us. And it's like an extension of our staff. They fully do as much as they can to help us with this event and to promote this event year round. And it's very fun to work with people like that.
Yeah. And that's, traditionally working with Ukrop's is such a joy, because they for decades as a supermarket trained people to be super nice.
Yeah.
And they are super nice.
They are super nice.
So it just keeps going with Ukrop's Homestyle Foods. And so there's just an element of I used to say that almost anywhere else in America, if you were trained as a grocery store bagger, that you wouldn't put it on your resume. But we would have resumes coming in saying that they had done that to come work at Sportsbackers because it showed that they had customer service training. And like, that's so cool.
We had Daniel Riddick on, and we discussed that Cameron's dad used to work at UCrops.
Yeah.
And he recently, she went to something at U of R recently, and the person recognized her last name and said, there used to be a guy at UCrops that worked there that I loved. And they said that Cameron's dad.
It's just, I don't know. It's a bit of a throwback, but hey, it's, we're talking about the 10K over
That's
years.
right. Yeah. Well, now you got your hard questions, your this or that's that are 10K related. So I've got one just because we were talking about UCrops. Do you prefer the big giveaways? Do you prefer a White House roll or a rainbow cookie?
White House roll.
White House roll. More versatile.
You had to be raised on rainbow cookies. My daughters would say rainbow cookies. I would say White House rolls. I wasn't raised here.
Transplant.
So.
Yeah. I think I would have to agree.
Rainbow cookies as an adult.
I feel like the only time I ever had them was at my grandma's house. Because my grandma literally lived up the street from UCrops. So I feel like she had them often.
Yeah.
But still White House roll. My this or that, which is one I ask often, is start line or finish line?
Finish. For sure. I just love seeing the emotion of it. Yeah. And
start line's a little too serious.
Start line's just, we turned it into a party.
Right.
Some years we were really intentional about turning it into a party. But the finish line is that feeling of accomplishment. Celebration of accomplishment.
I know. I love that 10K start line. I still love that's the crew, Mike and Mike.
I will say
we got our guys.
Well, you guys, I don't know if when you started, Nan, if we still did this, but we used to have someone up on a platform.
Oh yeah, we still did
lead the start line and various, basically how you could dance from the start line, and we would have people only that could see Richard.
I was going to say, I remember it was Richard from the Y.
Richard from the Y. And he would kind of lead everybody. And so the different ways that come forward, lead different things. Yeah, they were dancing. We do all sorts of stuff. It was
a long time to keep your energy up
It was definitely hours at one point. And it was actually it just goosebumps, when we got the whole crowd going like that. So, at one point we had 40,000 people. So and you didn't have all 40,000 doing it, obviously, but you would have thousands and thousands.
Was that the absolute craziest year? Because that was also the VCU Final Four year?
Final Four year was unbelievable because everybody was black and gold. They were going to be playing in the Final Four that night. It was just electric.
Yeah.
And so, there's just so much that went into that year. And so, it's definitely part of sports history in Richmond.
Was that something that when VCU made it to the Final Four and you all were then, and you knew when the game was going to be, did you have was it already trending to be far ahead, or did that just push it with people registering last minute and you all just knew this is going to be a big year?
No, we had sold out.
Oh, okay. All right. So it was already that big.
Yeah. It was huge. And we sold 900 gold Rampede shirts. You couldn't even buy gold shirts in Richmond at that point. It was everyone was printing everything on them. Everything was
the bookstore was just
everything
empty.
was gold or black. Yeah. But it was awesome, and to be right in the middle.
Maybe the most ever in history.
It's nuts.
That being said, I also always tell people the 10K to me feels like Richmond has such unique Richmond things. Richmonders love little weird Richmond Easter eggy type things. Right. The 10K is Richmond's holiday to me. I'm I always think about there was that lady that dressed up maybe last year or 2 years ago as Edgar Allan. Only in Richmond are you getting these weird niche costumes.
Yes, so Richmond.
It's the best. My last this or that is, do you think when you're retired, are we going to be able to find you more as a volunteer or out on the course because you're going to be participating in events now? On the course. I figured. Yeah. You've earned it. I would be out on the course.
I've worked a lot of events.
You're done.
Yeah. He said I've been there, done that.
And I don't know if it's, I'm holding myself funny because I used to pride myself on always being part of setup and breakdown. And the last few years, I don't like to do that so much because I get so sore afterwards. Like,
it's physical.
There's a certain point where I actually want to be running or biking or paddling or whatever and not be doing breakdown or setup at an event. Plus, we have a lot of events. Yeah, so I figure I'll just use age as an excuse and just move on. But the reality is I'm just saving myself from my own physical activities, which is why I'm more likely to participate than volunteer. Though you can volunteer with that. I'm assume that volunteering is actually like...
It's not. Volunteering is great. It is not. He just knows that if you have the special skills that we seek and you know how we set things up and down, you're going to be pulled into that instead of just being a normal volunteer.
Right.
Yeah.
What event are you most excited to do?
That's interesting. I would like to. I never was able to take part in River Rock, so I think doing some of River Rock's events would be fun.
Will you do some of the paddling events?
I could do a river race. So yeah, some of it could be fun. The marathon itself, I probably won't do the full marathon, but the half or the 8K might be fun to train for.
It's also
and some of it's not about doing the event, but having that goal, and then in this case to actually experience what I've worked to put on.
You could do the half or the 8K and then go spectate on the course somewhere fun and enjoy that.
Is it gonna be
or I could get a blanket and just lay down on the ground.
Yeah.
Or you could just lay down
for hours.
Steal a VIP tent pass, go over there and get an omelet or something.
Is it going to be hard for you to do something, like let's say you did like a half marathon training and you were like, you know what you guys should do? You guys should do this. Like, I should tweak this.
I will just eat those words.
I write it down.
You can make a burn book. Just write it down, your personal diary, never to be seen.
I'm trying really hard to be really good at this transition.
It's hard.
And then I want to be good about being retired from Sportsbackers too. I love this organization. I love what we do. And I've invested a ton of time and energy into making it successful. And I think part of the way that I help that success continue is to be a good ex-CEO and not stick my fingers into things here.
Right.
So I will be very intentional about just staying to myself.
Jon Lugbill, race participant.
Yeah.
That's what he is.
Yeah.
I've actually made a list of all the things that I've wanted to tell people here that we should do differently. And so far, I haven't done anything with that list. So I know I'm still in charge for 3.5 months, but Kern Goodwin wrote this book about Abraham Lincoln, and it's called Team of Rivals. And the big point of the book, which is the book behind the movie Lincoln, which was shot here in Richmond, which is really cool. And the carriage scene at the end is at Maymont, and that's all really cool. But the essence of this book is not about what decisions Lincoln made, but about the timing of when they would work. He understood that certain decisions can only be made during certain times in the country, and emotions and feelings have to be going a certain way in order to make that decision. And so that's something that's always been a little bit, so my list, that means it wasn't the right time to bring these things up. So I'm not just going to rush it. And I think that, having timing of good decisions, when things are ready, that's all actually a thing. And sometimes it's really hard to be patient. I will say, and that's something that I'm really glad Sportsbackers thinks about, and I think we've been very intentional. We think in the long term. We think in 10, 15-year increments. We have 5-year strategic plans, and some people say, oh, that's way too long. You don't know what's going to happen. We know in 2027 it's going to be the 50th anniversary of the Richmond Marathon, and you know what? We should be planning. And you know what? We're going to go visit other races and see how they celebrated their 50th anniversary. And you know what? We're going to be ready. And we're not going to say, well, we can't plan 3 years out. Like, no. We can plan 10, 15 years out. Yeah. And that's why we're doing Fall Line Trail, and we're doing other projects that take 15, 20 years. Thinking of that long term is part of our DNA at Sportsbackers, and I'm really proud of that. That we've accomplished that, and so that timing of when things get done, patience is really important. Yeah. An underrated leadership skill. You don't see many books titled Patience, Secret to Your Success.
Give us one last plug for the 10K. Why should people do it if they've never done the Crops Money and Avenue 10K?
It is so much fun. there's just so much energy and vibrancy, and it is an emotional experience, and it's also in some ways spiritual in the sense that it's amazing how good you can feel when a lot of other people around you are feeling good.
Yeah.
And it is worth every penny. You can go out and run this course anytime you want, but it doesn't feel the same as when you're out there with 25,000 other people that are all just sending out positive vibes. So join in the feeling good, and at least for however long it takes you to be out there and on the race course, and for a little while before and a little while after, you can have a positive experience that, you really can't get a high like that from else.
That was a great plug. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, make sure that you register. We want to see you out there. And then also, side note, we have the Virginia Credit Union River City Half and 5K this weekend, and there's still room to join that event in both the 5K and the half. 5K is probably going to sell out. It is real close. And the weather's looking great, so why not come out? Because also, if you're doing the 10K, 5K right now is right on your schedule for a little training.
Yeah.
So I think it's the perfect time to do that.
Actually, even a little break, because you only got to do 3.1.
That's right.
And you're supposed to be doing 4.5.
You warm up and warm down.
Exactly.
You can still get 840.
Exactly.
You just walk laps around.
Yeah, there we go.
But thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.